In October 2024, a country under decades of crushing economic sanctions, cut off from Western technology, isolated from global financial systems, and subjected to repeated covert sabotage of its most sensitive facilities, successfully struck one of the most heavily defended military installations on Earth. They did it with missiles they built themselves, not with an air force, not with a navy, not with the backing of a superpower, with domestically produced ballistic missiles, manufactured inside a country that Washington has spent 45 years trying to strangle technologically. Those missiles broke through a layered air defense system widely regarded as the most sophisticated in the Middle East, and they left craters at Nevatim Air Base, Israel's primary home for the F-35I, the most advanced fighter aircraft ever put into operational service. Now I want to be absolutely clear about something right at the start, because clarity is the entire point of this channel. The claims circulating online that Iran destroyed 40 F-35s, that Israel lost its entire offensive air capability overnight, that Washington has no military options left, that the old regional order is finished, those claims are false. They are sensationalized distortions built on a real event, dressed up in dramatic language to maximize outrage and views. But here is what is absolutely true, and what is far more consequential than any of those exaggerated headlines. The Fath-360 missile system, a short-range precision ballistic weapon that the Western defense establishment largely dismissed, has become the centerpiece of an Iranian missile doctrine that represents a genuine, growing strategic challenge to Israel, to American regional strategy, and to the assumptions that have governed Middle Eastern security for the last 3 decades. The October 2024 strikes were not a decisive Iranian victory, but they were a proof of concept. And a proof of concept is sometimes more dangerous than the battle it comes from. This video is 50 minutes of genuine analysis. No hype, no invented timelines, no fictional battle scenarios presented as news. Just the verified facts, the technical reality, the strategic implications, and the honest questions that most defense media is too cautious or too lazy to sit with properly. Stay with me, because by the end of this, you will understand the Fath-360 better than most people who write about it professionally. And you will understand exactly why what Iran has built matters, not because of the exaggerated claims, but because of what the real story tells us about where this region is heading. Let's establish the baseline, because context is everything here. The conflict between Iran and Israel is not new, and neither is Iranian missile development. What is genuinely new, and what makes this specific moment significant, is the convergence of 3 trends that have been building separately for years and are now arriving at the same time. First, Iranian domestic missile manufacturing has crossed a capability threshold that sanctions were specifically designed to prevent. Iran is now producing precision short-range ballistic missiles with accuracy measured in tens of meters from entirely indigenous components at meaningful scale. That is not an opinion. That is what satellite imagery and independent weapons analysts have confirmed through open-source research. Second, Israeli air defense, while still the most capable layered system in the Middle East, faces a mathematical problem that money and technology alone cannot fully solve. Saturation, the act of firing more simultaneous threats than a defense battery can physically intercept within a given time window, is a vulnerability that has been theoretically understood for decades. Iran is now operationalizing it in live conditions. Third, the geopolitical context has shifted. The Abraham Accords, the Gaza conflict, Hezbollah's degradation, and the broader regional realignment have created a strategic environment where Iran's missile capability is not just a defensive deterrent. It is an active instrument of regional influence. Understanding the Fath-360 means understanding all 3 of these trends simultaneously. It is not just a missile. It is a symbol of a strategic shift, and October 2024 gave that shift its most visible public demonstration yet. So let's start where every honest technical analysis has to start, with the actual weapon. What is the Fath-360? What can it actually do? And what has been wildly overstated about it? The name itself has been mangled so badly in online coverage that viewers who try to research it hit a wall of confusion immediately. You will see it spelled FAT-360, FEF-360, FA-360. All of those are transcription errors from auto-captioning. The correct name is Fath-360, from the Arabic and Persian word fath, meaning conquest or opening. It is a solid-fuel, short-range ballistic missile developed and manufactured entirely within Iran. Let me give you the specifications as they are understood from open-source defense analysis. And I will be clear where specifications are confirmed versus where they are assessed, but not independently verified. Range, approximately 120 kilometers. This is the single most important number to understand about this missile, because it fundamentally constrains how and where it can be used against Israel. Iran's western border is more than 1,000 kilometers from Israeli territory. The Fath-360 cannot reach Israel from Iranian soil. Full stop. I will come back to why this matters strategically in a moment, because the story does not end there, but this basic physical fact has been almost universally omitted from the sensationalist coverage, and omitting it is dishonest. Warhead, estimated at 150 to 200 kilograms of high explosive. This is a militarily meaningful payload, capable of destroying aircraft in open hardstands, damaging runway surfaces, and collapsing lighter structures. It is not designed to penetrate deeply hardened underground facilities, but against conventional air-base infrastructure, it is effective. Propulsion, solid fuel. This matters operationally in ways that go beyond the technical. Earlier Iranian ballistic missiles, the Shahab series, for example, used liquid fuel propulsion. Liquid fuel systems require a preparation process that can take anywhere from 30 minutes to several hours, depending on the system. During that preparation window, the missile and its launch crew are visible, vulnerable to detection and preemptive strike. Satellites can see the activity. Surveillance aircraft can track it. A timely intelligence response can neutralize the threat before it launches. Solid fuel eliminates that window almost entirely. A Fath-360 transporter erector launcher, the mobile vehicle that carries and fires the missile, can move to a pre-surveyed firing position, erect the missile, and launch in a matter of minutes. The launch signature, the thermal bloom that satellites and surveillance aircraft use to detect launches, exists for a fraction of the time that liquid fuel systems require. This dramatically compresses the warning timeline available to any defender. Accuracy. Iranian state claims put the circular error probable, the standard measure of missile accuracy, defined as the radius within which 50% of warheads will land, below 10 meters. Independent Western analysis, based on observed impact patterns from the October 2024 strikes, suggests the operational CEP is in the range of 30 to 50 meters. Both figures represent a substantial improvement over earlier Iranian ballistic systems, which had CEPs measured in hundreds of meters. That improvement is the central strategic development. The guidance system is where the technical picture gets genuinely interesting, and where responsible analysis has to be careful about separating what is confirmed from what is assessed. Iran has described the Fath-360 as incorporating an inertial navigation system combined with a GPS-assisted terminal guidance package. Some defense analysts, including researchers at the International Institute for Strategic Studies, have assessed that more advanced variants may incorporate an electro-optical terminal seeker, a system that allows the missile to compare the ground imagery beneath it against a preloaded digital target model in the final seconds of flight. If that assessment is correct, it has significant implications for electronic countermeasures. A missile that uses GPS throughout its flight can be degraded by GPS jamming. A missile that switches to an optical seeker in its terminal phase becomes substantially harder to defeat electronically because it is no longer dependent on an external signal. It is looking at the ground and guiding itself based on what it sees. However, the electro-optical seeker capability has not been definitively confirmed by independent verification. It is an analytical assessment, not an established specification. I am going to treat it as a possibility worth understanding and a development worth watching, rather than confirmed fact. That distinction matters. Now let me address the production scale question, because this is the dimension that nobody in mainstream coverage talks about enough. Single missiles are curiosities. Missiles in quantity are strategy. Iranian state media and defense ministry statements, combined with satellite analysis of known production facilities, suggest that the Fath-360 is being manufactured in meaningful quantities. This is not a prestige weapon produced in small batches for parade display. It is a weapon being stockpiled as a deployable military asset, with the explicit doctrinal intent of employing it in large-scale salvos rather than as individual shots. The strategic significance of this is not what it can do in a single engagement. It is what it represents about the maturation of Iranian defense manufacturing under conditions of sustained economic isolation. And that brings me to the historical context, because without that context, the Fath-360 is just a missile. With it, you understand why it exists and what it tells us about where things go from here. Iranian missile development is not random. It is the product of a coherent doctrine that has been evolving since the Iran-Iraq War of the 1980s, and it has been shaped at every step by Iran's specific strategic constraints and experiences. During the Iran-Iraq War, Iraq used ballistic missiles extensively against Iranian cities, including against Tehran itself, in what became known as the War of the Cities. Iran had no effective defense and no comparable retaliatory capability. The strategic experience of being unable to deter or respond to those strikes left a deep institutional memory in Iranian military thinking. The lesson that Iranian military planners drew from that experience was specific. A nation without the ability to threaten its adversary's territory with precision strikes is a nation that cannot deter escalation. Missiles became the cornerstone of Iranian deterrence strategy from that point forward. Now here is the uncomfortable irony at the center of Western Iran policy, and it deserves to be stated clearly because it has enormous implications. The sanctions architecture constructed over the past 4 decades was explicitly designed to prevent Iran from developing exactly the kind of precision missile capability that the Fath-360 represents. By cutting Iran off from Western aerospace components, precision manufacturing equipment, and advanced electronics, the theory was that Iran simply could not produce sophisticated weapon systems. You cannot build what you cannot buy the parts for. What the theory underestimated was that the sanctions also cut Iran off from the option of simply purchasing weapon systems on the international market. A country that can buy advanced missiles does not need to understand them at the engineering level. A country that cannot buy them, and still needs them, has to build them from first principles. Building from first principles requires developing the industrial base, the engineering expertise, the supply chain management, and the quality control systems to manufacture precision components domestically. Once that capability exists, once the institutional knowledge is embedded in the workforce, the universities, and the defense industry, it cannot be sanctioned away. You cannot unteach engineering. Iran today has a defense industrial base that is more self-sufficient, more resilient to external pressure, and more capable of independent innovation than it would have been if it had simply been allowed to purchase systems on the open market. The sanctions intended to prevent this outcome may have significantly accelerated it. That is not a comfortable conclusion, but it is the analytical conclusion that the evidence supports. The doctrine that emerged from this history is what defense analysts call asymmetric saturation. The core logic is straightforward. Iran cannot defeat Israel or the United States in a conventional air-to-air engagement. Iranian air power is aging, spare parts constrained, and qualitatively outmatched by an enormous margin. Competing symmetrically in that domain would be strategically suicidal. But a layered air defense system, however sophisticated, has a finite intercept capacity within any given time window. Every missile defense battery has a limited number of interceptors it can fire before it needs to reload. Every fire control radar has a limited number of tracks it can simultaneously process. Every command and control system has a finite speed at which it can assign intercept solutions and communicate them to battery crews. If you can fire more simultaneous incoming threats than the defense system can engage before reload, some portion of your salvo reaches its target. The question is not whether your missiles are individually more advanced than the interceptors. The question is whether you can produce enough missiles, reliably enough, to exceed the mathematical intercept capacity of the defense within a compressed time window. This is the doctrine that the Fath-360 was built to serve. Not to outperform an Arrow or David's sling interceptor in a one-on-one engagement, but to be produced in sufficient quantity and launched in sufficient coordinated volume to exceed any realistic intercept capacity. And there is a geographic extension of this doctrine that directly addresses the Fath-360's limited range. The missile cannot reach Israel from Iran, but it can reach Israel from Lebanon, from Syria, from positions in Iraq held by Iranian-aligned militia forces. Iran's strategic architecture does not require that every missile be fired from Iranian territory. It requires that missiles capable of achieving Iranian strategic objectives are positioned, through proxy networks and allied actors, within range of those objectives. The Fath-360 is the tactical instrument. The proxy network is the strategic delivery system. That distinction is critical. Now let me talk about what those missiles are flying into, because understanding the Fath-360 significance requires understanding the defense architecture it is trying to overcome. Israel operates what is genuinely, without exaggeration, the most sophisticated layered missile defense system deployed by any military in the world today. Understanding its real strengths is as important as understanding its real limitations, because you cannot honestly assess a threat without honestly assessing the defense. The architecture has 4 primary layers. At the highest tier is Arrow 3, designed to intercept ballistic missiles above the atmosphere, in the exo-atmospheric phase of flight, before they re-enter. Arrow 3 is optimized for long-range threats, including Iranian medium and intermediate-range ballistic missiles. Its intercept altitude means that warhead debris falls outside Israeli territory in many engagement scenarios, which is a critical operational advantage. Below that is Arrow 2, the endo-atmospheric intercept layer, engaging ballistic missiles as they re-enter the atmosphere. Arrow 2 provides the second opportunity to intercept a missile that Arrow 3 missed, at a lower altitude but still above population centers. Then comes David's Sling, designed to intercept medium to long-range rockets, cruise missiles, and shorter-range ballistic missiles. David's Sling fills the capability gap between the Arrow systems and Iron Dome, covering threats that are too fast for Iron Dome and too small or numerous for Arrow. And finally, Iron Dome, the most famous component and the one most people outside the defense community have heard of. Iron Dome intercepts short-range rockets, artillery shells, and mortars in their terminal phase of flight. It operates with a fire control algorithm that calculates impact probability. If an incoming round is calculated to land in an unpopulated area, Iron Dome may choose not to fire an interceptor, conserving its missiles for higher priority targets. This layered architecture is not a paper system built for press releases. It has performed in live combat conditions against genuine threats across multiple large-scale engagements. In the April 2024 Iranian strike, involving 170 drones, 30 cruise missiles, and 120 ballistic missiles, the overall intercept rate exceeded 99% according to IDF reporting, with allied assistance from American, British, French, and Jordanian forces. That is a genuine operational achievement. Dismissing it because some missiles eventually got through is like saying seatbelts do not work because some fatal car accidents still occur. The system works. The question is the margin at which it works under stress, and what conditions can compress that margin. The saturation problem is a real vulnerability, and it applies not just to Israeli systems, but to every missile defense architecture ever built, including American THAAD and Patriot systems. It is not a design flaw. It is a mathematical reality. Every battery has a reload cycle. Every radar has a track limit. Every command system has a processing speed. Exceed those limits simultaneously, and some portion of the incoming salvo gets through. The question is not whether saturation can theoretically defeat Israeli defenses. It can. The question is what volume of simultaneous, coordinated, multi-vector fire is required to achieve that effect, and whether any adversary can generate that volume while absorbing the cost of doing so. There is also a targeting intelligence dimension worth discussing separately, because it is a legitimate concern that Israeli analysts themselves have raised publicly. Ballistic missiles with a CEP measured in tens of meters can only deliver military-relevant damage if the targeting coordinates are accurate. Coordinates that accurate for specific shelter bays at a specific military installation require intelligence collection of significant depth and resolution. Whether that collection came from satellite imagery, electronic signals intelligence, human intelligence networks, or some combination of all three, the targeting data that Iran demonstrated in October 2024 suggests a more mature intelligence apparatus than was previously publicly acknowledged. That is a legitimate strategic concern, completely separate from the question of how much physical damage the missiles actually caused. Which brings me to what actually happened in October 2024 and why the truth, even stripped of all the exaggeration, is still genuinely significant. On October 1st, 2024, Iran launched what it designated Operation True Promise 2, a large-scale ballistic missile strike against Israeli territory, framed as retaliation for Israeli military operations in Lebanon and the assassination of senior Hezbollah and Hamas leadership. Let me take you through what is verified, what is contested, and what is false. According to IDF reporting confirmed by multiple independent sources, the October 1st strike involved approximately 180 to 200 ballistic missiles. This was a substantially larger ballistic missile component than the April 2024 strike, and it was deliberately focused on ballistic missiles rather than a mixed package of drones and cruise missiles. That shift in composition reflects an operational lesson. The slower drone and cruise missile components from the April attack had given Israeli defenders significant time for coordinated preparation. A ballistic missile-heavy salvo compresses that preparation time dramatically. Multiple independent analysts confirmed through satellite imagery and impact pattern analysis that Nevatim Air Base was the primary target. Nevatim houses both of Israel's operational F-35I Adir squadrons, the aircraft Israel considers its most capable combat platform. Targeting Nevatim was a deliberate strategic signal, regardless of the physical outcome. Satellite imagery from commercial providers, analyzed by independent researchers including Decker Eveleth and groups at the Middlebury Institute of International Studies, confirmed that Iranian ballistic missiles struck Nevatim Air Base. At least one hangar complex was significantly damaged. Craters were visible on the base. Secondary explosions were recorded. This is real. Missiles reached their target through Israeli air defense in meaningful numbers. That is a meaningful operational data point. The same satellite imagery that confirmed those hits also showed that the damage was substantially more limited than Iranian state media claimed. The analysis found approximately 4 to 5 confirmed impact points at Nevatim, concentrated in one area of the base. One hangar was significantly damaged. The runway surfaces were not put out of operation. The F-35 flight line was not destroyed. The IDF confirmed the following morning that Nevatim Air Base was fully operational. Video footage released by the IDF showed F-35I aircraft returning to the base after the strike. The CEP analysis, comparing the intended aim points to the actual impact locations, suggested an average circular error of approximately 800 to 900 meters for the missiles that reached the target area. That is significantly less accurate than Iranian state claims, and it reflects real operational performance under combat conditions rather than theoretical maximum precision. Now let me address the claim that is circulating most aggressively online, the assertion that 40 F-35 aircraft were destroyed. This is false, and I want to be precise about why it is false. Israel operates approximately 39 F-35I aircraft in total as of 2024. The claim that 40 were destroyed would require Iran to have destroyed more F-35s than Israel owns. That is arithmetically impossible regardless of the operational outcome. The origin of the 40 aircraft number appears to be Iranian state media amplified through networks of sensationalist YouTube channels. It has no basis in satellite imagery analysis, no basis in independent intelligence assessments, and no basis in Israeli military reporting, which would carry enormous political consequences if such losses were real and could not be suppressed even briefly. Strip away the false claims, and what you are left with is still genuinely significant. Iran successfully penetrated Israeli air defense with a meaningful number of ballistic missiles in a large-scale coordinated strike, the second such large-scale strike in 6 months. The missiles caused real, if limited, physical damage at Israel's most strategically symbolic air base. And the strike demonstrated improvement in Iranian ballistic missile capability, salvo employment doctrine, and operational planning compared to the April 2024 engagement. Most significantly, October 2024 demonstrated that the theoretical saturation problem in missile defense is not merely theoretical. It can be operationalized by a real adversary, under real conditions, against a real and capable defense system. The defense worked, but not perfectly. And in strategic competition, margins matter. That is the honest significance of what happened, not the apocalyptic narrative of Israeli air power eliminated. the genuine and concerning narrative of an adversary that is learning, improving, and closing the operational gap faster than the Western defense establishment anticipated. Now let's talk about what October 2024 means at the geopolitical level, because even with the physical damage limited, the strategic signal sent by those strikes reverberates far beyond the craters at Nevatim. Every Gulf monarchy is conducting its own quiet strategic calculation about the relative reliability of American security guarantees versus the practical benefits of regional accommodation with Iran. The October 2024 strikes fed directly into that calculation. The question Gulf leaders are asking is not, did Iran destroy Israel's air force? The answer to that is obviously no. The question they are asking is, if Iran can put missiles on Nevatim, one of the most heavily defended installations in the region, what does that say about the vulnerability of our own infrastructure? Saudi Arabia, which has been pursuing a diplomatic rapprochement with Iran brokered by China in 2023, read the October strikes as validation that the accommodation track has strategic logic. The UAE, which hosts American military facilities at Al Dhafra Air Base, is recalibrating how hosting those facilities affects its own risk exposure. These calculations were underway before October 2024. The strike gave them new urgency and new evidence. American defense planners face a genuine challenge in assessing the implications of Iranian precision missile capability for their own forward-deployed assets in the region. Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar, Al Dhafra in the UAE, Incirlik in Turkey. These are not hardened facilities built to absorb concentrated precision ballistic missile strikes. They are conventional military installations operating in the open with known coordinates, against an adversary that has now demonstrated it can hit specific structures at a military installation with enough precision to cause real damage. This is not a new problem for American planners. They have been grappling with the conceptually identical challenge in the Pacific, where Chinese ballistic missiles are specifically designed to threaten American carrier operations and forward bases. The difference is that the Middle Eastern version of this problem is now being actively tested in live operational conditions. Live tests generate data that planning exercises do not. China's interest in the Iran-Israel missile exchange is primarily analytical. Chinese military strategists have invested heavily in their own anti-access and area denial capabilities, missiles designed to hold American naval assets and forward bases at risk in the Western Pacific. Watching a smaller-scale version of that concept tested in live operational conditions, even partially successfully, provides validation and analytical refinement that classified war games cannot replicate. The lessons Chinese military analysts are drawing from October 2024 are not about the Middle East. They are about what it tells them regarding the conditions under which ballistic missile saturation can penetrate layered missile defense, and how those lessons apply to their own operational planning. Russia's interest is primarily diversionary. Every hour that American strategic attention and political bandwidth are consumed by Middle Eastern instability is an hour that reduces Western capacity to maintain pressure elsewhere. Russia does not need to take active steps to benefit from this. The benefit accrues passively. Additionally, Russian defense analysts are watching the performance of Iranian missiles against a Western-supported air defense system with professional interest, calibrating what operational performance tells them about the broader ecosystem of missile technology. What all of this adds up to is a genuine geopolitical reassessment, not a dramatic overnight collapse of the existing order, but a serious, sustained recalibration by multiple actors simultaneously. And that kind of sustained recalibration, happening across multiple capitals at the same time, is how the underlying assumptions of a regional order quietly shift even when no single event is decisive. So what comes next? What are the realistic scenarios? And what does honest analysis tell us about the direction of travel? Let me lay out 3 scenarios, with the honest caveat that predicting the future of any active military-political conflict is inherently uncertain. Anyone who tells you they know exactly what Iran will do next, or exactly how Israel will respond, or exactly what American policy will look like in 6 months is telling you something that serves their narrative rather than the truth. The first scenario is managed escalation and deterrence stabilization. In this scenario, both Israel and Iran treat October 2024 as a calibration event rather than a precedent for unlimited escalation. Both sides have demonstrated their capabilities, absorbed significant costs, and established new red lines through action rather than declaration. Iran has shown it can penetrate Israeli air defense. Israel has shown it can absorb Iranian strikes without catastrophic damage. Both sides have real incentives to avoid a full-scale conflict that would carry costs neither can absorb comfortably. The conditions for this scenario require diplomatic backchannels remaining functional and political leadership on both sides choosing restraint over escalation. The probability is moderate but entirely dependent on choices that are inherently unpredictable. The second scenario is continued asymmetric pressure below the full escalation threshold. Iran continues developing and deploying its precision missile capabilities through proxy forces, Hezbollah in Lebanon, militia forces in Iraq, Houthis in Yemen, while maintaining plausible deniability about direct Iranian involvement in any single engagement. This is the historical Iranian playbook, and it has worked reasonably well for years. Each proxy engagement imposes costs on Israel, provides operational experience, and incrementally improves the underlying capability without providing sufficient justification for direct retaliation against Iranian territory. The third scenario is an Israeli preemptive strike on Iranian missile infrastructure. Israel has struck Iranian assets in Syria repeatedly over the past decade, and the possibility of a more direct strike on Iranian production and storage facilities is one that Israeli planners take seriously. The challenge is that Iranian missile infrastructure is dispersed, hardened, and in many cases underground. A strike campaign large enough to meaningfully degrade Iranian missile capability would require sustained operations over days, not a single overnight strike, and would almost certainly trigger Iranian retaliation using capabilities that previous partial strikes were specifically calibrated not to deploy. It would also require American support or acquiescence that may not be politically available. Whatever scenario unfolds, one implication of October 2024 is clear regardless of the path forward. The economics of missile offense versus missile defense are moving in a direction that deserves serious attention. An Iron Dome interceptor costs approximately $50,000 to $100,000 per unit. A David Sling interceptor costs approximately $1 million. An Arrow 2 interceptor costs several million. The precision ballistic missiles being fired at these systems cost a fraction of these amounts. For simple unguided rockets, this cost exchange is manageable because unguided rockets cause minimal damage. But as incoming threats become more precise and more capable, as Iranian missiles graduate from scatter pattern harassment to precision structural damage, the economic burden of defending at scale grows accordingly. This is not a crisis today, but it is a trend line worth watching carefully because trend lines compound. On the technological response side, American and Israeli defense contractors are actively developing systems designed to change this cost equation. Directed energy weapons, high-power lasers, and high-power microwave systems offer the potential for significantly lower cost per intercept compared to kinetic missiles. The Iron Beam laser-based point defense system, developed by Rafael, is the most advanced near-term directed energy solution in Israel's development pipeline. The challenge is that directed energy systems face real limitations in range, adverse weather conditions, and power supply that kinetic systems do not. They are closer to operational deployment than they were 5 years ago, but they are not a near-term replacement for the current layered kinetic architecture. The race between offensive precision ballistic missile capability and defensive intercept technology is ongoing. Which side is currently moving faster is genuinely uncertain. And that uncertainty, the honest uncertainty, not the false certainty that content farms sell you, is the most important thing to carry with you as you watch this situation develop. Let me bring this back to where we started, and to the reason I made this video instead of the easier version. The easy version: Iran destroys Israel's air force, Washington is paralyzed, the old order is finished, gets more clicks. It generates more outrage. It drives more algorithm engagement. It is also dishonest in ways that have real consequences. It is dishonest because it presents fiction as fact. It is dishonest because it denies viewers the analytical tools they would actually need to understand what is happening. And it is dishonest because it serves the information war that both Iranian state media and the sensationalist content economy are fighting simultaneously, each for their own reasons. but with a shared interest in convincing you that the situation is more dramatic and more settled than it actually is. The honest picture is more complex and, in many ways, more genuinely interesting than the fictional version. Iran has built a real precision missile capability under conditions explicitly designed to prevent it. That capability is real, it is growing, and it represents a legitimate strategic development that deserves serious analysis. Israel's air defense architecture is a genuine engineering and operational achievement that has performed under real combat stress. It is not invincible, and the saturation problem is real. But it is not a failed system. It is a high-performing system operating in an increasingly challenging environment. The geopolitical implications of October 2024 are real. Gulf states are recalibrating. American planners are reassessing. Regional actors are updating their models. None of that requires the invented narrative of Israeli air power eliminated to be significant. The right questions going forward are not, who won October 2024? The right questions are, at what rate is Iranian precision missile capability improving? And what does the next generation of that capability look like? What investment is Israel making in directed energy and next-generation intercept systems? And is it moving fast enough to maintain the margin? What does American force posture in the region look like in 5 years if current trends continue? How do the Gulf states' evolving security calculations affect American regional influence? And what does the precedent of a sanctions-constrained nation successfully developing precision ballistic weapons tell us about the future of missile proliferation globally? Because Iran is not the only actor watching this and drawing conclusions. Those questions do not have simple answers, but they are the right questions. And this channel exists to help you sit with the right questions. Even when the right questions are less satisfying than a headline that tells you someone won decisively and someone lost completely. If this analysis gave you more to work with than what you were finding elsewhere, hit like and subscribe. Leave your sharpest question or your best pushback in the comments. The comment sections where people disagree with evidence are the only ones that actually improve the analysis over time. Share this with anyone who is trying to understand what is actually happening in the region rather than what the algorithm wants them to feel about it. Stay skeptical, stay sourced, and I will see you in the next one.